Starting small doesn't mean you're playing small. We got to build any foundation like one brick at a time. I think a lot of people try to go from step one to this totally polished product, and what they step over in many cases is that MVP, that minimum viable product. That's where you're going to gain all the feedback. That's where you're going to determine if you're even moving in the right direction. If you're moving into shark-infested waters or blue ocean, where you actually have something that people want, or there's an untapped or unspoken to need.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Living Vision Show. I've got a very special guest today. Zac Palmer is here with me in the house. We're going to talk first and foremost about Marvel, because he's got a backdrop that's all Marvel. If you're on video, you get to see it. If not, you guys know that I'm a big Marvel fan and comic book nerd. So we're gonna start there. But today, Zac and I are going to talk about offers. And the reason I feel so compelled to talk about offers is because you, as a business owner and an entrepreneur, need to know more about offers. This also happens to be Zac's lane of expertise. He's a high growth strategist, podcast host. He's got his own podcast. I would highly recommend you check it out, called the Perpetual Growth Podcast. We'll no doubt talk a little bit about that. He's also a consultant, and I know enough about Zac's background. We got connected through a friend to know that he's generated a lot, 150 million plus in sales for a lot of really prolific coaches in this space. And his experience in now helping people break through bottlenecks in their offers, their operations, and their sales infrastructure might help you in setting up your business different, and specifically setting up your offers. So we're going to dig in today. I think just a quick conversation with him before we had this opportunity to record together revealed that he's got a lot of wisdom and experience to bring to the table. And I'm excited that he's here with us today to help you with your offer and to help us level up together. Zac, happy Monday, dude.
Hey, happy Monday, Aaron. Happy to be here, my friend.
We're starting with Marvel, man. Which movie stands out to you as like the best and the worst?
Oh, dude, I don't think I have a best or a worst. I mean, they're all awesome. Like, I just love the Marvel franchise in general. But I mean, my favorites are, I mean, as you probably tell, Iron Man is one of my top favorites, and of course, Thor's up there. Thor was actually a gift. Iron Man's always been my main focus. But I kind of was given the nickname Thor at one point, and some of my team got that from me way back when. So
nice.
Yeah.
Did you grow up with comic books?
No, actually, ironically, like I don't think I ever had any comic books. My son gotten really into them, but not as much as I had.
Nice. All right. So there's a Marvel love that came later in life.
Yeah, as an adult.
Yeah, no, that's the way it's meant to be.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Once you have a couple coins and you can do things. I feel like Iron Man and like the stories there are really interesting, because not only is he sort of a cool superhero, I mean, who doesn't want to wear suit armor, but the whole story of him is like he's a successful business person. And I think there's something that entrepreneurs can all be drawn to, because there's this business acumen, this genius intellect, and then there's an enterprise behind him that's funding all of these really cool adventures. It's like exiting your business. You get to then be a superhero.
Yeah, dude. I mean, for me, the biggest thing is, it's like my tattoos, right? Like they're all metaphorical in nature. And Iron Man and his story, it's really the metaphor of the evolution of the human that I'm attracted to so much. It's like you have the man that was, brilliant, the playboy, the billionaire, all these things. And then through, series of events over years and years and years of time, it's the death of the ego, the birth of selflessness. You're starting to utilize all those same things that made him great in one area for a much more, it's the attitude of service, right? I mean, he really evolves into a servant leader and makes the ultimate sacrifice for himself in the end. And for his family and friends. And, I think it's that evolution of the man that I love it and appealed to so much.
Yeah, dude, it is a really cool arc. And I don't know that Marvel will ever be able to do what they did from Iron Man, the first movie, to Endgame. I don't know if they're ever going to be able to do that again. I was talking about this with a friend. Like, the cast was incredible, the storytelling incredible, but they were able to weave it before it got a little bit out of control. But yeah, I love his transition into a servant leader, and I think most of us that have a business aspire to that, even if we don't know how to get there. I think we do aspire to have a bigger impact. There is certainly the ego, like put me on stage and billboards and do all that. But
Hmm.
I think underneath every entrepreneur is a person that wants to make a difference, make a dent,
Hmm.
have a better life, and also sort of be the superhero that we all celebrate in some way.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And the irony too, I love that as an example because I never wanted to be on stage. Like I was the kid that was mortified to get in front of my classroom, let alone get on a stage in front of, hundreds or and ultimately tens of thousands of people. But it was the reframe, the mindset changes where I realized that, the depth and breadth of impact that you can make through one voice, through one experience. And it wasn't about the spotlight. It was about the impact. And that was the thing that allowed me to overcome those fears and really transform that entire experience because I love people and I hate seeing people in pain. So if I can, share some knowledge, wisdom, strategy, a tactic, any common story, I mean, something that helps move, motivate, inspire, change people for the better, then to me, that's exciting.
Now I understand why you were working in the coaching business and not necessarily as the front man, but you
Hmm.
were behind the scenes, right? What's the backstory there? Give me a little synopsis on what that journey was like.
Um, Dude, brevity's never been a strength of mine, so I'll try to keep
Yeah,
it brief.
that's okay.
I'll
That's
do the
what we're here
best I
for.
can to illustrate, right? Yeah, actually, I started in the health and wellness industry, so I took over a family business when I was 19 years old. Had no formal business schooling, education, mentorship, anything, and had to figure out, well, virtually everything the hard way. And through a series of events over that 17 years, I was an early adopter of the knowledge business blueprint that some of your listeners might remember when Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi first launched it. And I did well with the program. They put out a call for speakers. I was one of a handful of people that was selected from 1,000 plus around the world. And then the world shut down, and they asked me to stay on as a coach. So I was one of a couple hundred coaches, and uh, again, kind of flying behind the scenes. I don't want to get too deep into the story for quite a while, but then me and a close friend and partner ended up the head trainer, program developers, directors of coaching. I slipped into an operational role over the course of time. So we helped build out the entire program suite and operational infrastructure at mastermind.com for Tony and Dean. And so we were both front of the room, teaching from the stage, as well as building out the team of coaches and helping level them up, and so that we could serve our students from an even higher level.
So you got to see the front and the back, really, and
Hmm.
be in both roles, sort of in the middle of the hourglass in many ways.
Yeah, we had a duality to say the least. I mean, he and I both wore a lot of hats. I mean, we actually started out in identical roles, and obviously, it doesn't make a lot of sense in business to have two people in the exact same lane. So we decided to divide and conquer. And while we still shared a lot of tasks, that was the ultimate evolution. I mean, we were still both head trainers from stage, but we just took slightly different focuses.
So you've got some experience with not only the sales element of things, but you've also got experience on the backside of what it looks like to fulfill these, which
Oh yeah. Hmm.
in a lot of ways, I think this is where bottlenecks exist. Sounds like this is your lane of expertise. So let's talk about this. Like before we dig into maybe some of your wisdom and extract it, what do you see as the bottleneck when people are trying to take an offer and blow the thing up?
That's a loaded question. I mean, it could be one of countless different potentialities and variables, right? I mean, sometimes it's the right offer, the wrong audience. I mean, that's all too common. A big bottleneck is people striving for perfection and they never actually get the freaking offer out there. Sometimes it's the right offer, wrong timing. So we need to be mindful of market trends and conditions and where the puck is going, to reference the great Wayne Gretzky. Um, and then also it's clarity. I mean, and complexity. So complexity is the enemy of execution. If we make things too complicated to fulfill, then that's going to be a major sticking point for a lot of people. Um, as well as or in its polarity is the clarity side of things. If you can't clearly dispel exactly what you do and who you do it for and how you do it, it feels complicated. If it feels like it's going to take too many steps, from the client's perspective to get from where they are to where they want to go, then they're not going to be willing to put in that effort. So a big one is looking for opportunities to reduce or eliminate that friction. Like, how do you make it as easy as possible for your ideal client to go from where they are to where they want to go and remove all those sticking points?
I'm thinking back to coaching kids way before I was coaching entrepreneurs. And this was on the soccer field. And the goal was to create these patterns, right? These sequences in this game. And to do that, it had to be really simple, because if the instructions got really complicated, like they're 15, they're definitely checked out. They're not paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
And, if I translate that into what today looks like, whether it's our clients or people I see it's sort of in the same field, there's an excitement to tell everyone all the mechanisms and all the magic that goes into it, and nobody cares. Like, no one cares how you get someone there. Is that a common problem? Is it like over communicating the how?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big one for a lot of entrepreneurs, because so many entrepreneurs are the artist, the visionary, right? So I mean, Tony talks about this a lot. It's like the three archetypes. We have the manager leader, the artist, the skilled producer, and the owner. And ultimately, what we really want to do is shift business owners' mindset to becoming the owner. But more often, they're sitting in the seat of that artist, the skilled producer, the one that's the creator, the visionary, that's bringing all the stuff to fruition. But to be really effective in business, we've got to be able to wear each of those hats effectively, and then ultimately learn to step back into that lane. Otherwise, we are more of an employee than we are an actual business owner, right? So when we are inherently more often that the artist and the visionary, yeah, you get excited talking about all of the mechanics, all the things, because you want to share that knowledge with the world. But people don't want to hear all the things that you know. They just want to know the minimum viable components that will get them from where they are to where they want to go. And I think that's a really great point along these lines too, is I think a lot of people try to go from step one to this totally polished product. And what they step over in many cases is that MVP, that minimum viable product. And it almost feels counterintuitive. It's like, why would I start with this one thing? Why would I start with this basic rendition of the product? Because that's where you're going to gain all the feedback. That's where you're going to determine if you're even moving in the right direction. If you're moving into shark infested waters or blue ocean, where you actually have something that people want, where there's an untapped or unspoken to need. So, starting with, I love this quote: starting small doesn't mean you're playing small. We got to build any foundation like one brick at a time.
What came to mind as you talk about the minimum viable product is, I got a 3-year-old, and seeing the world through his eyes is very interesting, because he doesn't care. Like, he doesn't care just about most things. Presence machine, which is beautiful. The other day we were doing laundry, and he asked me a question about like the laundry pod that we put in. I don't have a clue what this thing does. Right. I understand sort of in theory that I drop this thing in and turn on the wash machine and it works. And that's what I'm invested in. And it's a oversimplification, but I don't need to know how this thing works. I don't need to know what's in it. All I know is that instead of pouring in just throw it in and turn the wash machine on, and it works. And I think even for high ticket programs, and I'd say even the higher the ticket, the more it needs to be this way. Most buyers want trust, credibility, and simplicity. What do you see buyers really having an affinity towards? Is it those things? Is it a couple different things?
I mean, it honestly really depends on the buyer. But I mean, if we're to oversimplify it, especially in the high ticket space, people are typically either looking for do it yourself, do it with you, or do it for you. And, ironically, the challenge that happens is the higher that you move in the higher ticket space, like the done for you products, which you would expect and anticipate that you're going to pay more for, the expectations also grow. So you're not only managing a product, you're managing expectations. And if you aren't onboarding the right clients, then managing the product, the outcome, and the expectations becomes a very convoluted process, because They expect to have all the things done for them all the time without any questions, almost to the point of where they're expecting you to read their minds. So, whereas if you're a do-it-yourself kind of person, you anticipate going in and having to learn those processes and absorb and take the time and make mistakes. And you'd love that process. You love to learn. And then there's the middle ground, which frankly I think for most people is that sweet spot. As long as you're communicating expectations consistently and from the forefront, you're always framing. The number one most important thing I think we need to do in life and in business is control the frame. Tell people where to look, why they're going to look there, what the outcome is going to be. If you can anticipate what the roadblocks are going to be, what the challenges are going to be, what the emotional journey is that your client is likely to take as they go through this, what are some of the things that they're going to want? What are the things that you're doing right now that are creating inconsistencies in your process, that are creating friction where people are not happy? And if you can create solutions to those problems and present them in a forward manner, and sometimes the solution is just telling people you don't have a solution, like telling people this is something that we are working on, or this is something that you are going to experience. Just because of the fact that you told them in advance that you are going to experience this, you already lowered that wall. You lowered that barrier. So power of anticipation and appropriate framing is, I think, one of the most impactful gifts that we can learn to leverage.
Man, I want to dig into frames a little bit. It's come up recently with a couple clients, and we've almost had to do training on it. Not only is it important for sales, it's important for leadership. I think it's important with a 3-year-old, right? The idea being that to communicate a frame is also to allow someone to move within that frame rather freely. But there's a boundary, right? There's a set of parameters that you're in. If you were talking to someone that had no idea what the heck a frame was, and they were adults, right? They're like proficient, they're good at their job, but they've never heard of frame. How would you define creating a frame?
It's an interesting question. I would look at it as nothing more than telling a story. And to your point, you're putting a container around that story objective so that people stay within the lines, right? So, we have pre-frame, reframe, deframe. Pre-frame is you're telling somebody in advance what to look for, where to maintain their focus so they don't get distracted by other shiny objects or problems or opportunities or whatever. So pre-framing is looking in advance and telling people where we are going so that they maintain focus on that thing. Reframing is taking something that we already know and sharing it in another context, with an anecdote, a metaphor, something that helps them shift their awareness to that one particular thing to something else that they can already relate to. And then deframing is the process of taking something that somebody believes they know and showing factual evidence that tears down that wall and shows them it's just absolutely not true whatsoever. So our frame is just our current lens, our field of vision. It is what we believe to be true. And if we can start to control that vision in advance and plant seeds and anticipate a better future, then we can help ensure that we maintain focus and don't get distracted by all these other things.
A really good way to describe a frame. I think it can be difficult to articulate framing to someone that has never seen it. But most really good communicators are using frames all the time. It's so frequent, and you almost can't see it, right? It's natural. And what it does is it allows someone in both me doing it and in receiving it, it allows someone to flow into the conversation that doesn't feel controlled. It just feels safe, in my opinion.
That's the objective.
Say more.
Well, just use the example of your background behind it. You have your digital whiteboard, right? Like, all I want people to do is focus on living vision. I want them to focus on what is inside the frame. So all I'm doing is saying, all right, guys, so what's coming up next? You guys are going to notice a whiteboard behind you. And in that whiteboard, there is the logo living vision. I want you to maintain all of your focus. What do you see there? What color is the V? What color is the I? What is the impression it gives you? What is the energy? For me, what it means is, I've got a king, I'm royalty, I'm representation. You notice the crown living in the eye in the background, right? And a lot of that is about the way that we show up in life. How are you showing up in life? And what you're doing is you're bringing their focus so that it doesn't leave, quite literally, that frame. We're removing all the other noise, the other stuff in the background, so that people in that moment aren't getting distracted or overloaded with all of the other bits. So when you tell people what to focus on, the brain naturally will go directly to that thing. So that's the power of framing. We see it in marketing. We see it in sales conversations. We use it with our kids, spouses, and friends. It's just most people don't recognize they are. But when you can learn to use it effectively as a powerful tool, it makes you an outstanding communicator.
I 100% agree with that, dude. I was trying to break down frames. I'd love to hear if you would add anything or modify this. The way I just defined a frame to a guy that's managing a team was to basically tell them the intention, tell them the objective, and then to tell them the end point. And if you could oversimplify, but if you can get used to, hey, I'd like to have a conversation with you, that's one. Then the goal of the conversation is to unpack what came up in our last meeting. And we'll know, if we can get to a place where we find our commonalities, it's going to be a great conversation, right? Just really simple, pop, pop, pop. Would you add to that for someone that's just learning the basics of maybe even just spotting these?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty spot on. I mean, a lot of what I would tell people is, look, all you're doing is presenting, here's what we're going to do. Here's why we're going to do it. Then we go do that thing. And then we circle back and check for continuity. You anchor the outcome. Because if you are as excellent at what you do as you believe you are, and I'm sure all of your listeners are, when we have a desired outcome, when we have a particular path that we know our clients need to take, we give them the what, we give them the why, we do the thing, and then we circle back and anchor that outcome so that they believe, so they can start to see and associate the progress they made with the steps that you told them to take. So all we're doing is maintaining, we're conditioning focus and then anchoring that outcome so that they begin to associate the steps they took with what you anticipated to begin with, and then the outcome that they now got.
So if you're listening, I want you to pay attention to the rest of this conversation as a host. And Zach, you know this because you host your own. My job is to constantly adjust the frame and to come back to guiding the conversation through the lens of frame. So if you're listening, just pay attention because we're using frames all the time. And specifically as a host, you've got to use a frame. Like we're about to transition into another frame, which is a frame, but we're going to transition into another frame here. So Zach, having a frame I think is important to running a business, being in sales, whatever you're doing, communication is going to be really key to that, especially in leadership. But I do want to talk about offers because what I notice is that offers can really align with your vision and where you want to go with your life, your business, your enterprise, or your superhero outfit. And sometimes they can completely misalign. And even if you get a lot of people to say yes, they can send your whole life and your business upside down.
Mm-hmm.
Let's stay zoomed out first. What are there any patterns that you notice that trip people up when they try to build their business? Their offer is working, like people are saying yes to it, but maybe the backside isn't complete, or they don't know entirely how to make the transition from like a growing offer set, a growing number of yeses into a full-fledged business.
That's an interesting question. And I think the question that precedes the question is, what do you want? And I don't think enough entrepreneurs take the time to determine this in advance. And to be more specific, what I mean by that is, do you even want to have a massive business? Like, I think a lot of us live under the illusion that, like, because we see it so often that, you want to have 100 employees and be earning, generating $100 million a year in revenue. And while that sounds sexy superficially, it's like, are you really willing to make the sacrifices that are going to be required in order to get there? And there are going to be sacrifices that are required. And it's going to be a lot of time, revenue, and energy. So the first question becomes, how much revenue do I really want to make? We already have determined the vehicle, right? Like you've already got a product that's outstanding. You've acquired years of knowledge and wisdom and developed your skill sets. I mean, all those things are important. So I'm operating under the assumption that that's there and that you're leading with a servant's heart. But what you have to do then is take a step back and decide what really makes me happy. At this stage of life, what's most important? If you're somebody in your 20s, you might be willing to make a bit more sacrifices now to build that company than maybe somebody that's in their 30s or 40s who's like, I've gone Mach 10 with my hair on fire for the last decade or 2 decades. And now what's most important to me is being able to take that step back and spend more time with my family. Decide, am I going to work 3 days this week or am I going to work 5? Are we going to take a family vacation or are we going to stay at home and hang out in the pool this weekend? Like, determining what is most important to you from your value system relative to your stage of life is the first thing to maintain alignment and actually ultimately help you determine what decisions you're going to make around building your business. Because you can go ahead and build this incredible thing all of a sudden to realize that it's not really what you wanted to do.
Okay. Full stop. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Zach, yes. What do you say to the guy that is obsessive about revenue being the like top of the food chain for what matters? What heartfelt message would you say to that guy that maybe is trapped in the box of like, no, I just have to get to more revenue. I just have to get to more revenue. Because somewhere in there, they believe that getting more revenue is going to unlock something. But you've been down this path before. You've seen it. I know. So what do you say to that guy?
Well, first thing I would need to do too is clarify: are we talking about revenue in business or take home revenue at the end of the year? Because if we're talking revenue in business, the first question that always comes to my mind is, it doesn't matter how much you make; it matters how much you keep. And revenue can be on the incline while net profitability is on the decline, and eventually you're going to hit that conversion point where you're actually running out of money. So, um, I think it's really important to clarify, are you talking about putting more money in your pocket or in the business's pocket? And then what does that actually do for you? What is most important at this stage in life? Is that really going to solve another problem? The reality is, I think that most successful people would say this is the more that you make, the tendency for most people is the more they spend. Right?
Yeah.
There's never really enough. I mean, but there's always enough. It depends on if we're living in abundance or scarcity. So it always comes back to, what do you want? If he's happy and he's content and he is ultimately revenue focused, sometimes we have to go through those painful transitions where you realize I spent all this time building something at the sacrifice of my fill in the blank, at the sacrifice of my health, at the sacrifice of not dating. Or maybe you're already married and you sacrifice the quality time with your relationship and it's now falling apart, or with your kids. I prefer not to get there. The way I like to avoid that is by conditioning those worst case outcomes in advance and really trying to think about, again, power of anticipation. It's like, if I continue on this path, what are the ultimate wins that it's going to provide me? But also, what am I going to have to give up? And I don't think people spend enough time in that. We tend to look at life through rose-colored glasses, and the reality is, things only feel good because of all the bad shit that we've been through too. So we have to get really clear on what's important in that stage of life. But it's tough because I got to be coaching in the moment. I'm very fluid and I'm very good at asking the right questions as they are necessary. So I'd really have to be, in it with somebody to go a level deeper. But ultimately, it always comes back to me is what do you want? What stage of life are you at? Why do you believe you need that thing? Like, do you really know? Can you know? I mean, I love Byron Katie's work, right? Can you know that? Is that 100% true right now, here in this moment? Do you need more money? And the reality is, no, nobody in this moment needs more money. You have everything you need in this exact moment in time. Yeah, maybe in an hour from now, 24 hours from now, your rent's due, but in this moment, you don't need anything else. So if we can learn, and then that's the power of a reframe, asking another question. When I believe that thought, what state does that put me in? How do I feel? How do I start to show up in life? And then I'm sure anxiety is one of those things. If I think I need more revenue, then I'm feeling more anxious in the moment. Why am I thinking I need more revenue? Well, I want the new car. I got to pay for the kids' school. I want to be able to fly on the private jet, like whatever the things are, it doesn't really matter. But if you reframe that again, you go, well, if I didn't believe that thought, I didn't believe I need more revenue, what would the opposite of that be? Like, I don't need more revenue. And then you look for ways to believe that to find that is true. How is that true? How is that showing up in your life? And the power of that reframe in that question is so impactful in the moment, because it helps you to realize that everything that you believe you need, that you want, that you desire, is a future projection that oftentimes is founded in scarcity. And our entire life is a projection of the mind. So if you're leading from that place of scarcity, you're always going to be chasing it. And until we start to question the mind and really take a step back and ask, is this true? And consider the alternative, then you're going to be stuck on a path that's usually being guided and narrated by somebody else. Something that you heard in your childhood, something a mentor shared, something that a parent shared, whatever. So the only way to get absolute clarity and really determine it is ask better questions. You ask better questions, you get better answers. And all of it comes down to where am I at in this moment? What really matters?
Cool. Dang. We need to sound trumpets for that, dude. Whew. I love all of that. There's a wisdom, I think, in and underneath that. My experience has taught me that I'm often stuck not asking the right questions for myself. Right.
Mm-hmm.
As a guy that's great at asking questions for everybody else, I still need help. And it 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 is the most confounding and frustrating thing, right? That I can't ask those questions for myself, but that's not how
True for
gifts work.
all of us, though. It is 100%.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What I've learned is I'm doing something, it's working, and I make this assumption that that's the way it has to be because it's working. I think we all get stuck here. What I've learned from helping others get through it is that with the right question, you can unlock the door. You can really change this. The conversation about offers seems to spearhead right directly to this, because if you build your offer and it's working and things are going great and fine, and like it looks on paper like it's growing, you may never question whether your offer is leading you to the life that you want. And dude, I've gotten stuck many times where I'm looking at what I'm doing and I don't like it anymore. Like I just don't. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not in love with it like I used to be. It feels like
Mm-hmm.
the art is dying. It feels like my passion is dying. It feels like the growth is sort of decaying. And each time I have to get help from the outside to say, hey, help me think about this different. And every time, what changes first is the offer. What I think is really fascinating, when you change your offer, you can change everything else in the business behind it. But if you don't change your offer, I have gotten stuck many times just living it's like Groundhog Day
Mm-hmm.
over and over because I refuse to change the packaging of it. When you're helping people repack it, sounds like a big part of that arc is what do you want, which I think is a very important place to start. But if we look at the mechanics of changing your offer, it also has become obvious to me that if I change small things, I get a very different life. I'll give you an example of that. I used to run 60-minute calls every week. Now, if we're doing one-on-one work, it's 90-minute calls every other week. Totally different life. Bigger bandwidth, better bang for the buck. We used to always get to like the climax and like the moment at like minute 53. And now we can capitalize on that and get to the other side and have another 40 minutes to unpack it. But it changed a lot for me to like tweak that little mechanic, to go from
Mm-hmm.
weekly to bi-weekly and change the time, changed everything for me. Are there other patterns like that that you see when you're helping companies really get to the other side of change and set up their business differently?
Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It all comes down to identifying the patterns. And the difficult thing for me to say is there a pattern of the patterns? Not necessarily when it comes to program development, but the important thing is to identify the pattern. That's either the sticking block or the thing that's the accelerant. And when we can, either pour more fuel on the fire and accelerate growth or pump the brakes when necessary and slow things down, it, either outcome is going to be good as long as we are taking the step back and determining why are we doing this. It's like, always start with the outcome. What is the outcome that we want? And then second, we move to the why. And then we move on to the how. And sometimes that's the who, right? But the problem is we try to get so strategic so fast, and actually more appropriately, so tactical so fast that people don't clearly define the target. And unless you know what the target is, what you're very clear on that desired outcome, then all of the how, all of the strategic and tactical elements are always going to feel like an execution mess or nightmare. So I know it sounds trite, but it's ultimately true. Determine what you want, get really clear in that vision, and clear why you want it, why it's really important to you, and then fall into the how, then move into the how. Most people get stuck in the tyranny of how before they've ever really clarified what they want to begin with. And that's one of the biggest struggles that people deal with. But when it comes to offer creation, I mean, it can be it could be it can be countless different variables. I mean, it can be a misalignment in the in the messaging. It can be lack of continuity from marketing to sales to fulfillment. It can be the actual product development. It can be shifts in the marketplace, the current economy. Are we? It can be new technological advances that we're not taking into account and how that could impact the quality of the product or the minimum viable product that we're presenting to the market. Can we help people get to that particular outcome faster? Can we remove more steps? Like there's so many different potentialities that it's really hard for me to identify the one thing, but you already hit the one thing. It's look for the pattern. And then how do we either remove steps in that process to make it shorter, more concise, faster to the end result, or remove the ones that are creating the most common broken links in the chain that are creating the most problems.